right, welcome back to another episode of the Psychopedia podcast. I'm your host, Investigator Slater, here today with a extremely special guest who is back for round 2, which either means that she had fun the first time or she is just a glutton for punishment, or maybe both. But either way, I have with me today Kaelyn Moore, host of Heart Starts Pounding, where she dives into all things horror, hauntings, and mysteries. And now she's also added another podcast to her resume, Clues, which she co-hosts with Morgan Absher, where you guys basically do true crime. But anyway, all of that is to say, welcome to Psychopedia. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
So happy to have you here. And you're so busy now.
I am busy. Yeah, I have the new show that started, Clues, which has been awesome to do. It's a little bit more like straight true crime than Heart Starts Pounding is, because Heart Starts Pounding, we get a little bit into like folklore and urban legends and other spooky fun stuff. But it's been like a really interesting transition doing like more straight true crime.
Yeah,
like
and you guys take on, it's true. I mean, this is my happy place. So like what you do now is literally my playground. But you guys take on the really big true crime cases. You know, you're not really doing the subtle ones that people haven't really heard about. Like you guys came out of the gates with the biggest true crime cases out there, I feel like.
Yeah, we did a lot of big ones to start, which I was like fun to just come out swinging. And it was interesting to revisit some of those and like read all of the books that have been written about cases, like Casey Anthony. There was so much about that case that I just didn't know that I learned about by reading books that have been written about the trials and stuff after. And I think a lot of people also didn't know that. So it's nice to be able to revisit those cases with all the context we have now. And I will say for people too, like we are starting to do a lot more lesser known cases as well.
Yeah, it's good to shake it up.
Yeah, people that are still missing, like things that can actually be done, people who can still be found. So it's been, we're trying to do a big mix, but I really like deep diving into the big cases too.
Yeah, that's when you really get to know the cases too, when you're researching them like firsthand that's what I always say, boots on the ground is the best way to really get a handle on these cases. Like you can read the headlines, you can watch the Netflix version of whatever's going down, but unless you are in the weeds with the research, getting firsthand sources and really like following leads and going into every corner there is, you're never going to get the full picture.
Well, we just talked about it when you were on my show earlier this month because you were talking about that bus cannibal from Canada, that terrifying story. And that is a case where everyone read the headline when it happened, but not many people know the follow-up. Like I had no idea what happened with the trial or what happened to that guy afterwards. So it is interesting to kind of follow something all the way through and like through sentencing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So so morbidly fascinating, which is my whole brand. I love it.
Exactly. Speaking of morbidly fascinating, I just want to like digress for 1 second. I'm sure you're a huge fan of the Twilight Zone. I feel like you have to be.
Yes. Oh, that informed me as a child.
Yeah, same.
Talking Tina was probably like the first scary thing I ever watched as a kid. And I still have nightmares about that episode.
I'm Talkie Tina. Yeah,
and
sorry.
I hate you.
Exactly. It's so scary. So I started watching it with my kids because especially my older one is like just as creepy as I am. So
that is they're like the perfect age for it.
Perfect age. I'm like, you got to start cutting your teeth in the creepy world so that we can, co-host together one day maybe. So there was
so that you can work on Mommy's podcast.
Exactly right. There was an episode that I just saw for the first time and I really thought that I had seen them all, called The Exhibit. Do you recall that name? Recall seeing it?
Remind me, what's like the log line?
All right. So basically, there's a guy who works at a museum and it's like a true crime themed museum. And there's an exhibit that he oversees in the museum called Murderer's Row. And there's life-size wax characters of serial killers. So there's Jack the Ripper, life-size in wax, and like 4 others that I can't remember right now. Basically, the museum closes, all right? And the guy's like, I can't bear to see these characters, these wax figures that I've taken care of my whole career, just like vanish. I'm going to take them home. So he takes them home and he stores them in his basement. And his wife is not happy about this, obviously. And he is obsessed with these figures. So much so that he basically stops working. He stops making money. His wife's like, we have no money for food. She goes to her brother to borrow money just to buy groceries. And she's like, you've got to stop spending all day, every day in the basement with these wax figures. He paid to have an AC unit put in so that they wouldn't melt, right? He's giving it all he has. So anyway, the wife goes in the basement in the middle of the night to unplug the AC unit so that the guys will melt and her husband will have nobody to obsess over anymore. But when she goes down there to pull the plug on the AC unit, Jack the Ripper comes to life and kills her. And this happens 2 more times. It happens with her brother-in-law who comes over to check on things. He gets killed by one of the guys, and the old museum curator gets killed. Anyway, the last scene of this whole thing is the guy goes in the basement who's taking care of these figures, and he's like, why would you kill everybody in my life? I've done nothing but taking care of you guys my whole career, and this is how you thank me? You kill my wife, you kill my brother-in-law, you kill my friend. And then these figures come to life and they're like, but we didn't kill them. You did. And then the last scene of the whole episode is he's the 6th wax figure in a new museum featuring serial killers.
That's so good. So good. So good.
I feel like I gave you guys just an episode before the episode, but
isn't it crazy to think too? Because those episodes were coming out in like the 50s and 60s. Like even then, they were obsessed with Jack the Ripper.
Yeah,
this is not a new thing that we are talking about serial killers. They've really always been very curious about the case.
It's human nature that people are fascinated about. You know what I mean? It's
yes.
He represents what people are terrified of, what people don't understand, what people are afraid that they can relate to a little bit too much, whatever your reason is. But yeah, it was such a good episode. So I figured you would appreciate it with me, and not too many other people would, except everybody on the other side of this microphone.
Were your kids pretty scared watching it? How do they do with scary things?
It was a little bit of a mistake in retrospect to have the little one in there.
You have to watch. Okay, maybe not. People are going to disagree with me, but like, I watched a lot of scary stuff way too early. Like I watched Poltergeist at a sleepover when I was 10, and it wrecked my life for like months.
Yeah.
And now I make a living doing scary stuff for my life. It's like, you know,
you've not only survived, you took it and you used it to catapult yourself.
It just like informed so much of me. It like remolded my brain and opened me to this world of horror, and I'm so thankful for it. So I think he'll be okay. He'll be fine.
You're so creepy. It's fantastic. So I just want to go through a few items of business super, super quick for my listeners, and then we're going to get into the case. And it is a long case. It is a fascinating case. It is a historic case. It's right up your alley. It was literally hand-selected for you, Kaelyn. So I hope you enjoy it. But before we get onto it, I just want to say to my listeners, if you love what's going on over here and you want more of it, I have an answer for you. It's Patreon. Patreon.com/psychopediapod, where we offer ad-free episodes that drop the same exact day as the public version. There's one Slaterpedia every month, which is a full true crime case that comes out exclusive to you guys. And then Unhinged episodes Be My Guest, starring you guys as my co-hosts. And now, in addition to all of that, we are offering early access to my new podcast series, Girl on Gore, which today is Wednesday. So this past Monday, the first episode for Girl on Gore released publicly. But if you want access to that heat before it comes out publicly, join now, and make sure also that you subscribe to the Psychopedia channel. Like wherever you're listening to this podcast right now is where you're going to find Girl on Gore. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that. And the last thing here is just, I love to give a quick shout out to our patrons, because they come up, a lot of them, with such creative names that I want to shine a light on them. And even if you can't come up with the name, you are equally worthy of my love and gratitude. But I picked out just a handful of names. So this week we have Pilates and True Crime. So I'm curious to know if you do Pilates whilst listening to True Crime. I'd be interested. Mask of Sanity, which is obviously a fantastic expression. It's one that I use often. Jen.Oreo, love it. Shane Mulligan. Katie Make Noises. And Oh My Mariana, which is a nod to the Oh My Nelson, I believe, which was an episode we did way back, episode 36, California Cannibal, about Oh My Nelson. So I love it when you guys go back in time also and you pull things, because it brings me back. And then, it reminds me to cover those episodes on Patreon too. Okay, that's it for like the housekeeping stuff. I'm ready to dive in. Kaelyn, if you are.
Let's do it. I'm excited to see what you picked out for me today.
Okay, just for you. The screams did not rise until the fire in the mansion reached the attic. By then, smoke had already begun to curl through the ornate wrought iron balconies, not as a warning, but as a revelation that the mansion's elegance was the snare and cruelty had always been the trap. Neighbors and passersby gathered outside, some helping, some gawking, as flames licked at the edges of a home that, given what was happening, felt too still. Something beyond thickening smoke was very wrong. The lady of the house refused to open her doors and instead snarled at the crowd to just mind their business rather than enter her home. The enslaved individuals typically teeming through the halls were nowhere in sight. Why weren't they running towards safety? Why weren't they pouring out the front door, smoke-streaked, screaming and gasping for air? It wasn't until the flames threatened to consume everything that the crowd stormed the front entrance, breaking past resistance, shattering decorum, and kicking down the door at the top of the grand staircase. The one with the bolts and the smell and the stories. That door didn't just lead to another room. It led to the reason the screams had stopped. And that reason almost appeared like it was not of this world. The crowd outside did not believe what they were seeing, but they also smelled it. And then they heard and saw with their own disbelieving eyes what lay festering inside that room. Chains bolted to beams, bodies, some still breathing, barely, all mutilated beyond recognition. Scars on top of scars, bones snapped and twisted into shapes that defied nature. One man had a hole in his skull. Another was covered in writhing maggots, alive but already decaying. One woman was crawling, wearing a spiked, rusted iron collar and dragging a chain behind her like a leash from hell. All too weak to scream because they'd already been screaming for years, but no one was listening. And what the people were seeing wasn't punishment, it was pleasure. And at that moment, the most elegant woman in New Orleans had been unmasked as its most prolific sadist. This is the case of Marie Delphine de McCarty, better known as Madame LaLaurie.
Oh my gosh. As you were saying it, I kind of started figuring it out because I did a very ghosty New Orleans episode myself, but this is one that I have not done a deep dive on yet. So I cannot wait to hear what you found out about this case.
So you can give us some context, which we're going to go through in terms of New Orleans at the time and the creepy haunted stuff. And I'll give you the deep dive on the historical stuff. This case is steeped in history. I'm going to get on with it. Let's just get on with it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Today, we are taking an unflinching dive into one of the most infamous and downright repulsive stories in true crime. At its core, this is a case of unfathomable human-to-human cruelty, but it's also one that's wrapped in centuries-old legend and rooted in the most putrid soil of American history. It's not only a case about what was done, it's about who did it, who enabled it, and who was left to suffer in silence. So, Kaelyn, obviously, you know this, but I'm going to share it for anybody who may not know it. And to be completely honest with you, until I did the research on this case, I really didn't even know this. But New Orleans does not just flirt with the supernatural. It's in like a long-term, possibly toxic relationship with it. Ghosts don't haunt New Orleans. They inhabit it, and they refuse to leave like it's rent-controlled. They wander the alleyways, lounge on balconies, and press their fingers against the glass just to remind you that they never really left. And the worst ones, they don't follow you around while moaning in the night. They smile, sit still, and wait for you to come to them. With that, you're going to get your first pop quiz early. Okay, so pop quiz.
Okay.
On a list of the 10 most haunted cities in America, what number does New Orleans come in as?
Ooh, I'm going to try to guess the top 3. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to guess that New Orleans is number 1 or 2.
Okay, so you don't want me to give you options. You're going to come out with it.
No, I'm gonna come out swinging.
Let's go, girl.
I'm very confident
Your
about this. And you're going to tell me
bravery
how wrong I am.
It's phenomenal, and I love it.
I'm going to guess Savannah, Georgia is also in the top 3. And then Gettysburg.
You are correct with Gettysburg and Savannah. And so are you saying New Orleans is number 3?
I was going to guess that it was number 1, but now I'm kind of feeling like I'm wrong. Okay, so you tell me now.
Okay, well, listen, mad props. Like, that was super impressive. So New Orleans is actually 4th, if you can believe it. You're going to kick yourself when I tell you what's 3rd.
Okay.
Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh, duh.
Duh,
okay.
right? I know, it's okay. It was looking at you in the face, which is why you missed it.
As a New Englander, I'm so embarrassed right now.
That's okay.
This is like really tragic for me.
When you're holding your car keys and you're like, where are my car keys? It's like that. So let yourself off the hook. Yeah, so Savannah's number 1, Gettysburg is number 2, and Salem's number 3, and then comes New Orleans.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which, honestly, this is going to sound very, I don't want to say ignorant. I don't want to diss myself like that because I'm not an ignorant person. But to be honest, I was like, why is Savannah, Georgia, number 1? Very silly question, because once I researched it, I was like, duh. Like,
Civil War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Duh. Battles, disease, fires. Yeah.
A lot of guys dying of diseases during the Civil War there.
Yeah.
And sticking around, lots of like hospitals. I have so many stories about all of these cities. And so I'm going to try to not like take over the episode with them. But I was on a train once with a woman, and she was from Tennessee, maybe. Christian woman, was like, I don't believe in ghosts. Because I was telling her about her surrounding, and she was like, listen, I don't believe in ghosts. But I went to Savannah, Georgia, and something happened and I can't explain it. And I was like, oh my God, tell me. She was like, I was staying in this hotel, and it was me, my mom, and my 2-year-old daughter. And as we're staying there, like eventually I found out that this used to be a hospital during the Civil War, and I didn't really feel that great about it, but whatever. I don't believe in ghosts because my faith doesn't, like, we don't believe in ghosts. But I was talking to my mom late at night in the room, and my daughter was sleeping on my lap. And at one point she wakes up in like the middle of the night and looks over in the corner and says, Mom, is that man going to get me?
Oh my God, I'm going to throw up.
Just stayed up the rest of the night just praying because she didn't know what else to do. She was so scared. She was like, I never thought ghosts were real, but I can't explain what happened. Like, she saw something, and there's just like so many stories.
Well, kids have a knack,
like that.
Number 1, for saying the creepiest shit.
And seeing things.
And
I think
exactly
kids are a little
what I
more
was going to say.
Tapped in. Yeah.
They don't have sort of the experience and the life that we have that gets in the way of our ability, perhaps, to like see what's really there. Like we put intellect above all else, whereas I think kids are just like, no, it's right there. I'm not going to overthink it. It's right there in the corner. Like if we saw that, I'd be like, it's probably a plant or a shadow or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The kid's like, no, there's a man in the corner. Is he going to be there all night?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Freaky as hell.
Kids are just tuned in.
So twice a night, nearly every night of the year, except for Christmas and Mardi Gras, you can find ghost tours winding through the gaslit streets of New Orleans. And my understanding, Kaelyn, is you have been on one of these ghost tours.
Yeah, I did one of the New Orleans ghost tours.
Okay, so
And we went by this house. I will say on that tour, the tour guide was like, some people are really sensitive to spirits and they start feeling nauseous.
Yep.
Like she said that at the beginning. So like just be mindful. And we're like, oh, okay. We get to the LaLaurie house, Madame LaLaurie, and she goes, this is where the most people have thrown up on the tour.
Yeah.
And apparently just on the corner, people start retching because there's so many bad vibes coming off of the house. So
yep, I have that here in my notes, that just standing outside of the mansion is enough to make you feel like you've been hit with food poisoning, the flu, and a panic attack simultaneously. It's sort of this combination of nausea, dizziness, chills, an overwhelming sense of dread just by standing in the vicinity of the house. I don't know if you can attest to hearing this, but moaning is said to echo from within the walls, and the sound of chains dragging across the floor can apparently still be heard. And then there is the stench, thick, rancid, unmistakably like rotten meat, which is a scent long associated with hauntings.
Yeah. When we went, there was like a Texas billionaire that bought the house, I think like 13 years prior, and is only ever there on Halloween. Mm-hmm. This guy only goes to the house on Halloween, and the house was abandoned every other night other than, and maybe Mardi Gras he would show up for.
Right.
But other than that, the house just was sitting there abandoned, and people who were on the tour and the tour guides were like, yeah, we can just like, we'll see things in the windows.
Oh, yeah.
We hear all these noises. Like sometimes we'll be like, oh, he's definitely in town because there's for sure people upstairs right now. Like the lights are on and people are moving around. And then come to find out, no, he's not in town. Like there's no one is supposed to be in the house.
Right. Because the house is never truly abandoned. That seems to be the reality of it. So the address is 1140 Royal Street. and it was the site of real human horror orchestrated by Madame LaLaurie, who, since the discoveries were made in her home, the ones that I described as being, discovered after the fire, she has since become known as a monster, a demon in the shape of a woman, and a fury escaped from hell itself. She was a legit wolf in sheep's clothing, just cloaked in wealth, decadence, and high social status on the outside, but like a fucking level 10 sadist underneath. A sadist who not only hid behind her privilege, but weaponized it. She threw lavish parties in the mansion, all while screams from enslaved people echoed from a torture chamber next to the servants' quarters in that same home. It was said that buckets were filled with human heads, body parts, and organs, while the scent of rot crept through the walls and floorboards, masked only by the perfume and bourbon wafting through her candlelit soirees. I'm going to mention it at this point. When it comes to Madame LaLaurie, myth and fact are stitched together tighter than a corset, right?
Welcome to New Orleans history.
Yeah.
That's just, a lot of it was word of mouth, and like the culture of folklore and legend is so rich there. But it's also how you have to tell the stories.
For sure, for sure. In this case, there were some letters that were discovered from people living who knew the LaLauries. There are some court records, but yeah, it's legend. It's just word of mouth being passed down. But you kind of have to be able to sort of parse out what is myth and what isn't. And I think the dangerous thing with sort of in Madame LaLaurie's case is just saying like, have you ever heard of the legend of Madame LaLaurie? Like, yes, there's a lot of lore around it, but she was a human being who did horrific things to other human beings. So we can't just say it's legend or she was a monster or she was, a demon in the shape of the woman. No, she was a human being who did horrific things that society more or less allowed her to do.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm as like a history nerd, I'm so excited to hear the letters and the actual like documents that you found in the research.
I also love that you love history because we're going to go through a whole bunch of history today. We have to. Yay. There's no escaping it. So I'm also a history buff. Like I love it. So for me, this episode was right up my alley.
New Orleans has the most interesting history in the entire country. Like it's just not like anything else in America. And I will stand by that every single day.
Do you know I've never been to New Orleans?
You have to go. Oh my gosh. It's like the most supernatural I've ever felt in my entire life, like anywhere I've ever gone.
Well, now I have to go. Maybe even this weekend. I don't think I'm going to be able to wait.
Take a trip.
I will. I'll leave the kids at home for that one, though.
That might be a lot for them.
Marie Delphine McCarty, known to history, of course, as Madame LaLaurie, was born on March 19th, 1787 in uptown New Orleans into one of the city's wealthiest and most powerful families. Her lineage traced back to Irish settlers, and her relatives included military officers, merchants, plantation owners, even a mayor and a governor. The McCarty family had sprawling real estate, owned dozens of enslaved individuals, which sucked, and were deeply intertwined by blood and marriage with the city's elite. Now, Delphine, again, who's Madame LaLaurie, as we knew her as Delphine in her youth, so I'm going to kind of possibly interchange here between Delphine and Madame LaLaurie while we go through her earlier years. I'm going to try not to, but it may happen. She was one of 5 children raised amidst immense privilege in a city that had a population of roughly 4,800. Of that number, a staggering 3,600 were enslaved Black people, meaning the city was built quite literally on a foundation of bondage. To better understand the world Madame LaLaurie was born into, it helps to take a look at the broader backdrop of New Orleans in 1787, which is what we've both alluded to. At that time, Louisiana wasn't even part of the United States. It was still under Spanish colonial rule, having been transferred from France to Spain in 1763 following the 7 Years' War. It wouldn't become part of the U.S. until the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, a land deal that nearly doubled the size of the young nation. But despite the Spanish flag flying overhead, French Creole culture still reigned supreme in New Orleans. And at the center of that culture, woven into its economy, social hierarchy, and daily life, was a brutal and deeply entrenched system of violent, dehumanizing, and inheritable slavery. Suffering was fossilized in lineage, generation after generation. In urban centers like New Orleans, enslaved individuals referred to in legal texts as quote-unquote passive creatures, a term that deliberately stripped them of agency and personhood, were often employed as skilled laborers, artisans, or domestic servants, and were used as tools of control and terror, leaving scars that absolutely would never fade. And this horrific systemic degradation and exploitation, understandably, fostered a deep-seated resentment and sense of injustice, to say the least, which sowed the seeds for potential rebellion, which is why, in 1787, there was growing paranoia amongst Louisiana's white elite about the potential for slave rebellion, especially in a place where enslaved people far outnumbered them in many regions. Ergo, any whisper of rebellion or hint of insurrection was met with swift, brutal, and very public punishment. Executions, mutilations, and torture carried out not in secret, but in the open as warnings. And, make no mistake, this was all perfectly legal, sanctioned by the law and intentionally designed to keep the system running on fear. For example, 2 enslaved individuals who killed an uncle of Madame LaLaurie's, their names were Temba and Merleton, were tortured on the rack until they confessed. Then they were sentenced to, quote-unquote, be dragged from the tail of a pack horse with a halter tied to the neck, feet, and hands around town until they reached the gallows, where they were then publicly hanged. Temba's body was kept public until it was, quote-unquote, consumed, meaning picked at by animals and bugs, and his hands were cut off and nailed up on a public road. 3 other slaves were actually convicted as accomplices and received 200 lashings each, had their ears cut off, and 1 man was tarred and feathered and mounted on a pack beast. So Madame LaLaurie grew up in a world where the torture and killing of enslaved people wasn't only, not questioned, it was tradition. It was culture. She was raised to believe that the pain and suffering of enslaved people was just background noise in a privileged life. For her, violence wasn't a horror to be challenged or, God forbid, stopped. It was a legacy to inherit.
I imagine, too, if you're already kind of prone to, I don't know, maybe schizophrenia or psychosis or psychopathy. Yeah, and you're seeing all of this violence growing up. It's kind of awakening something in you.
I would agree. And I think if you're born without empathy, if you're literally wired that way and you're seeing this, I don't even think you're making a judgment call oh, okay, this must be fine. It just is fine, if that makes sense.
Wasn't that a thing? Did you ever cover the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez?
I have not covered him yet.
Obviously, you should. I mean, it's so perfect for this podcast because it's just the darkest story ever. But he was someone who also was kind of maybe primed for psychopathy and was shown incredibly violent images as a child and was just that combination of things really kind of awoke this violence in him.
Yes. Also, getting back to the case, many men, including Madame LaLaurie's uncles, cousins, and even her father, openly fathered children with free women of color who were then given the family name and inheritances. And I just want to say something about this before we move on. So yes, even though free women of color were legally free, many, of course, still faced immense societal pressure and discrimination and limitations that made it difficult for them to refuse relationships with white men. The power dynamics during this time were deeply skewed, and the social, economic, and racial hierarchies were harshly enforced.
You're talking about free women also in the early 1800s, late 1700s, which is something that's unique to New Orleans that didn't exist in the rest of the country because they were under Spanish rule.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so there were free people. There were mayors who were Black men in the 1800s in New Orleans, which you just didn't have anywhere else in the country.
Exactly.
But it also obviously comes with all of these other problems as well.
For sure. Free women of color, especially in New Orleans, were often economically marginalized and had limited social mobility. So while they had some legal freedoms compared, obviously, to enslaved individuals, they were still subject to discriminatory laws and practices and opinions and treatment, Many free women of color relied on relationships with white men for economic stability, social status, or even survival. And these men, especially those of wealth or power, would often use their position to coerce or manipulate these women into relationships, and I use that word kind of loosely, relationships, with promises of financial support, legal recognition, and sometimes even marriage, which was rare, but it was not unheard of. So all of that is to say that many speculate that Madame LaLaurie's deep-rooted hatred toward enslaved people was forged out of resentment that those she had been taught to devalue and dehumanize were now sharing her inheritance.
Oh.
Right. That's
wow.
an interesting spin on it, which is horrible.
Girl, grow up.
I mean, seriously, grow a pair. Like, it's...
Yeah.
But while the exact catalyst behind Madame LaLaurie's next-level depravity remains murky, because it does, one thing is clear. Instead of evolving with the times, Madame LaLaurie doubled down on dominance and cruelty as she got older. And in the early years of antebellum America, she wielded her power to commit acts of torture so horrific, they still stain the pages of history. Now, for the record, and we're going to talk about this more later, but since we're talking about reasons why Madame LaLaurie went on to become who she became, I think Madame LaLaurie went on to do what she did for one simple, serial killer-flavored reason. She was a sadist through and through. I'm not trying to say it's as simple as that, right? Like sadism, like it's complex. But really, everybody's always trying to, like, maybe it's because she was resentful. Maybe it's because...
Right. Well, maybe, like, you kind of, like, humanize her too much in that way when you're like, maybe she was upset because she wanted her money so she could start her own life and, like, they were taking her money. No. But you don't chop people's heads off and put them in buckets because you're upset they might take your inheritance.
Correct.
Yeah.
You're enjoying what you do. You're not feeling empathy or remorse. You are a sadist. In 1800, when Louisiana was still a Spanish colony, 14-year-old Madame LaLaurie / Delphine, it feels so weird to call her Madame LaLaurie because she doesn't even have the last name LaLaurie yet at this point in our timeline, but she married her first husband, a 35-year-old high-ranking Spanish royal officer named Ramon López y Angulo de la Candelaria.
Hold on one second, because I really don't want to feel bad for this woman for a single second, but she was 14 years old and she married a 35-year-old man.
Yeah. Welcome to 1800. Totally unacceptable. Not defending it. It's creepy and it's predatory and it's horrible, but it was what it was for the times. Unacceptable.
God. Wow. Yeah, horrible.
Madame LaLaurie was married 3 times over the course of her life, and each husband was pretty despicable in one way or another. For example, Ramon, her first husband, who I just introduced with 1,000 names, who was second in command to the Louisiana governor, went against Spanish orders and reopened the importation of enslaved Africans in 1800, despite a ban meant to pause the trade until the region was more stable. So he opened the slave trade in Louisiana after it had been closed for 4 years.
So even though he was, like, old and gross, she probably also liked him because she just liked horrible stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. They were definitely, like, vibing, I would imagine, on that horrific front.
Kind of made for each other, yeah.
Ugh, match made in hell. But sadly, perhaps for her, on January 11th, 1805, while sailing from Bordeaux, his ship struck a sandbar off the coast of Havana, killing him instantly. Around the same time, Madame LaLaurie gave birth to their daughter, Marie, and shortly after, she and her baby girl returned to Louisiana, which by that point had officially become part of the United States. Okay, so now she's single, with a baby, back in Louisiana. 8 years later, in March of 1807, which was a few weeks after Madame LaLaurie's mother died and left her a downtown plantation on the bank of the Mississippi River, along with 52 enslaved individuals, Madame LaLaurie married her second husband, a French native named Jean-Paul Blanc, and went on to have 4 children with him. I feel like people were so fucking fertile back then. Like, everybody had 1,000 kids.
I mean, yeah, they also started so young. Like, you can have so many kids if you start when you're 14.
Good point.
Which, like, and your body is really not supposed to do that. But, like, they were just doing it, I guess.
So her father gifted her another plantation upon her second marriage.
And she was so worried about her inheritance. And here she is getting all of these houses and plantations and enslaved people.
First of all, that's why that reason I don't think ever really could be taken seriously.
Right. You're right. Yes.
It is out there in many sources, so I wanted to include it. But yeah, but also think about it, right? Like, it's not that she wouldn't get, it's that they will get. Do you know what I mean? You know, the psychology there. It's not even that I'm getting less. It's that you're getting anything at all when you shouldn't.
Yeah, the idea that like, oh, if someone else gets something, then that takes away from what I have. And that's always like kind of like the oppressor way of thinking, right? Like, oh, some of my power will be lost if other people get any power, even if that power is like unrelated to anything I'm doing in my life.
Right.
That was just like on full display with her.
Completely. It's not that I need more. It's that I want you to have nothing.
Yes.
You know? So her father, as I said, gifted her another plantation upon her marriage, as well as a property on Charter Street and an additional 26 slaves. In today's value, okay, Madame LaLaurie's inheritance was worth over $2 million.
Oh my God.
Now, on the surface, Madame LaLaurie's new husband, Jean-Paul Blanc, was reputed to be an important man in New Orleans commerce and politics and was a merchant, lawyer, banker, and a state legislator. However, beneath the surface, he was as crooked as the Mississippi River. He was a massive slave trader who also worked with two infamous pirates, brothers Jean and Pierre Lafitte, to smuggle goods into Louisiana, such as 27,000 pounds of illegally obtained coffee. Pop quiz.
The Lafittes were kind of cool in their own way. They were horrible, but like being pirates that smuggle coffee into America is like kind of cool.
Okay, so listen. You obviously know a little bit about these pirate brothers. So I have very high hopes now for this pop quiz. But in 2 minutes after the pop quiz, I'm going to talk about how they basically shaped America. How they are literally possibly to the people to look at and to say, oh, America is what it is today, literally because of you idiots.
Yeah.
All right, so
because of you dumbasses.
Exactly. But first, pop quiz. Which statement is true about pirate Jean Lafitte? A, he once challenged Andrew Jackson to a drinking contest and lost after passing out in a barrel of rum. B, Disneyland Pirates of the Caribbean attraction in Paris features a portrait of Jean Lafitte. C, Jean Lafitte faked his death in 1823, but was spotted years later living as a preacher in Kansas.
Okay, wait, sorry. One of those is correct.
Yep. Which statement is true? And I can go through it again.
I know he had, so who was it? Andrew Jackson I know Andrew Jackson spent a lot of time in New Orleans.
He did.
And also maybe had his own bar in New Orleans too, on Royal Street, I think, where they invented the absinthe slushy, or it's called like an absinthe slush or something. I can't remember what it is, but it's like an absinthe drink that they invented in New Orleans and it's delicious. I never thought I would like absinthe, but they still serve it to this day. So I'm going to guess that one, that they had a drink off.
I'm so sorry, my friends, because you are so intelligent and bright and you have all of this beautiful knowledge of New Orleans, but unfortunately you did not get the pop quiz correct.
Oh, no. Dang
You want to take another guess?
Is it the portrait in Disney?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Disneyland Pirates of the Caribbean attraction in Paris features a fucking portrait of Jean Lafitte. Also, in the loading zone for the Disney ride is a ramshackle boat landing with a misspelled sign that says Lafitte's Landing, spelled incorrectly.
Oh, they like spelled his last name wrong?
Yeah.
Oh,
What?
Interesting.
How do we know this and it's not fixed? Anyway.
Yeah.
So even worse than smuggling coffee in with the pirate brothers, Blanc trafficked actual human beings as well, even after the African slave trade was officially abolished in 1808. It's estimated, get this, that he was responsible for trafficking in about 400 people.
Jesus Christ.
So I have to bring it back to the pirate brothers for a second, which is what I mentioned before. That is, I said I was going to, hit you with something like heavy hitting about these brothers. Because I'm a history nerd like you, I found this bananas. So Jean and Pierre Lafitte famously aided the Americans in the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812 after cutting a deal with Andrew Jackson in exchange for pardons. But here's the wild part. If Madame LaLaurie's dirtbag husband, Blanc, hadn't been mixed up with both the pirates and the politicians, that deal might never have happened. The Battle of New Orleans was a game changer, right? Cementing U.S. control over Louisiana and launching Jackson's path to the presidency. So a fucking sadistic socialite's piece of shit husband may have indirectly helped shape American history along with pirates.
Ugh, don't you hate American history sometimes? You're just like...
This stuff baffles me.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Wow, interesting.
Now, Blanc either died or disappeared about a decade after marrying Madame LaLaurie, leaving her neck deep in debt. But just as the financial noose was tightening, Madame LaLaurie's father died, how convenient, and left her a sizable inheritance, enough to pull her and her children back from the brink. For context, Blanc's disappearance left the family saddled with a debt equivalent to roughly 3.3 million US dollars today. A scandalous sum that could have sunk their social standing for good if not for that well-timed inheritance.
Wow, yeah, well-timed.
Right?
Suspicious.
It is a little sus, it is. And it's also a little sus, by the way, that we don't know if Blanc actually died or if he disappeared himself, perhaps, because he was in so much debt.
And he knew he had access to ships. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
He smuggled human beings day in and day out, professionally, if you will. So if he wanted to take himself off the map, he absolutely would have been able to.
Yeah, he was just hanging out on a Caribbean island somewhere.
Very likely. By this point, Madame LaLaurie was now wealthy in her own right, independent, influential, and fully in control of her fortune and her image. Until, that is, January 12th, 1828, when at 40 years old, she went on to marry her third and final husband, the man who would give her the last name that would echo through history as a byword for death, torture, and brutality, Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie. I tried to be fancy there, and I don't think I nailed it. A 25-year-old chiropractor with a medical degree and apparently a tolerance for chaos and a taste for sadism.
I didn't know they had chiropractors back then.
He practiced something known as orthopraxy, which depended, I'm going to get into it in a second here, but it depended on the mechanical treatment of deformities.
Oh.
Interesting, but hang tight for a second because I just want to pull you back up for a second. So Dr. LaLaurie and his now wife, Madame LaLaurie, met when Madame LaLaurie's daughter, Pauline, needed treatment for having a curved spine. And since he specialized in what was considered and called deformities back then, she wound up in his office and they met. And I guess sadistic sparks flew. And if they were lucky, burned the shit out of each other. And then they probably laughed and got really turned on by the pain. And they were like, this is going to work. This is going to be a thing between us.
I'm so curious what the cure for scoliosis was back then. Like, what would he do to those poor people's spines?
Torture them with horrific apparatuses.
Yeah.
So from the start, the marriage was turbulent. Letters from friends at the time reveal that Madame LaLaurie and her now new husband would fight, often separate, and then return to each other. And that's like a direct quote from a letter from the time. Some of these very letters also contain the earliest whispers of Madame LaLaurie's cruelty toward the enslaved people in her household. Subtle at first, but unmistakable. They also indicate that Dr. LaLaurie may have been subjecting his own stepdaughter, Pauline, whom he was supposed to be treating for her curved spine, to deeply inappropriate and possibly abusive medical interventions.
Oh, God, yeah.
So as I started to mention, he practiced what's known as orthopraxy, which depended on the mechanical treatment of deformities. So think like bone setting, joint manipulation, and realigning limbs with medieval-looking devices.
Right, yeah.
He also, this is so bad, he also experimented on enslaved people with Haitian-style, quote-unquote, zombie drugs, which were chemical concoctions believed to induce a death-like paralysis, followed by a terrifying state of reanimation marked by obedience and cognitive dulling. It was pseudoscience meets sadism, all in the name of control.
Yeah, that's like a whole episode in itself.
For sure.
Zombie drugs. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I went down a rabbit hole, admittedly.
Did you read about that guy who disappeared for 18 years and came back and said that he had been fed the zombie drugs by like a man who kidnapped him?
No.
Oh, I forget what his name is. I was just reading about this. Yeah, because like zombie culture, that's where zombies come from. Like the idea of zombies is from Haiti, and it was like a punishment. Like zombifying someone was a punishment that you did to them, and you would do it with these drugs. And so this one man disappeared for 18 years and was probably being held on like a farm by this guy who was giving drugs to his like zombie slaves that he had made.
Oh my God.
And then that guy died and they stopped taking the drugs and they kind of woke up. And so this guy just like went back home and was like, oh yeah, this happened. So that's another story where like the myth and the legend is like so interwoven in the history. In fact, it can be hard to parse apart what's real and what's not. But the zombie drugs coming from like Haiti zombie culture is like a really interesting topic.
It is. It's like a chemical lobotomy almost.
Yeah.
You know? Just real quick, that case that you just talked about, was that like a recent thing?
So it was Clairvius Narcissi, and he lived from 1922 to 1994. So it was really in the last 100 years.
Terribly long ago.
That's a really interesting case. You should look into that one too, because it's like, it's dark. It's really dark.
Well, that's on my list now. Thank you, Kaelyn. So when these experiments with the zombie drugs inevitably killed many of his victims, Dr. LaLaurie would just dump their limp, poisoned bodies into the swamp like discarded test subjects, stripped of life, dignity, and even a grave. It was in the year 1831 when Madame LaLaurie purchased the elegant Royal Street home that would later become famously known as the haunted LaLaurie Mansion. And it was during this time as well when one of the legends surrounding Madame LaLaurie emerged, one that intertwined with another well-known New Orleans resident at the time, somebody, Kaelyn, I believe you've covered on Heart Starts Pounding, a voodoo priestess named Marie Laveau, a.k.a. the Voodoo Queen.
Yes. Yeah, we covered her on Heart Starts Pounding. There's a lot of like really, really cool stories about Marie Laveau.
Well, she was apparently a good woman.
She has a really interesting, I don't know. I would say she was like chaotic good.
When I say good, I mean she wasn't experimenting with zombie drugs. She wasn't using her gift or whatever we want to call it to do harm unto others. Like she... No. She
was using voodoo to like change New Orleans politics and culture kind of in a way that serviced her. It wasn't necessarily for like the ultimate good of society. Sometimes it was just for whatever benefited Marie, but she was really powerful. She had... there's stories about her because she started as a hairdresser. So she just knew all the rich people's secrets in the entire community. Oh, yeah. And so she could use that along with her like voodoo powers that she was wielding. Some people think it was just like the fact that she knew all this information from the rich people. But yeah, she really got everyone to kind of like bend a knee to her. She has such a cool story. Yeah, she's a really, really cool historical figure.
Yeah, hairdressers have all the tea. So do... nail technicians, like, it's true. We walk in and we have therapy for an hour. Us,
totally.
Clients.
And then she would go to like the judge in town and be like, I heard someone's gonna like go after your daughter for this reason. Like, you might want to pay me some money.
Nobody ever connected the dots. Like, hey, all of our secrets are leaking and we're all going to the same hair person.
I think they were scared of her because she
that makes sense.
was using so much voodoo at the same time. So it was really unclear, like, does she know this because, like, she did this person's hair? Does she know this because she just is, like, this all-knowing being?
I don't know. Maybe get your hair somewhere else just in case. Like, get it done somewhere else,
I know. And now her grave is, like, I don't know if you've ever, like, seen pictures of her grave in New Orleans. She has this, like, big tomb in the St. Louis Cemetery #1. And it's like covered in red X's because people will come ask her for favors. And like the legend is, and this is like the tour guides will tell you this is not how it works. Please stop like desecrating her grave. But the legend is if you leave her 3 X's and ask for a favor, she can still grant it beyond the grave.
Wow.
So
they don't have it like sectioned off and protected?
They don't. They've sectioned off a lot of the graveyards in general, and you have to pay to enter them now because there was so much mayhem happening. And hers... for whatever reason, they still let people... I mean, you have to pay to enter and you're on a tour. So people must be jumping the wall at night to go leave the X's.
Yeah.
And they paint over it and stuff too. But yeah, people just keep doing it.
Okay. So this particular legend that connects Marie Laveau and Madame LaLaurie is famously known as the Devil Baby of Bourbon Street. Have you heard of it, Kaelyn?
No.
Okay. So some people may have... if for no other reason than the 3rd season of American Horror Story includes like a very violent storyline between Marie Laveau and Madame LaLaurie, but it's like completely dramatized, obviously. So talking about not being able to parse through fact and myth, do not look at that episode and think you're getting like the real version of events.
Actual history. You're getting Ryan Murphy brings you American history. Yeah.
Exactly. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because you are really, more well-versed, more of an expert on Marie Laveau, but she was a free woman of color who practiced both Catholicism and voodoo.
Yes. Yep.
As a voodoo priestess, she became known for leading public ceremonies, most notably her legendary racially integrated St. John's Eve rituals, and for offering private aid to those seeking spiritual or medical help. But what I've learned from you is that perhaps it's because in some way it benefited her. Like my interpretation, and I did very, very on the surface research because this case isn't about her, but my research that I touched upon with her painted her as like a real do-gooder.
There is one story, I mean, we cover it in Heart Starts Pounding in our New Orleans episode. Like there was a time where this young man was accused of like abusing or murdering his wife. And the man's father really didn't want him to go to jail. So she like cast a spell so he wouldn't go to jail because she was being paid by his dad. Like there's stories about like that about her where she is just gonna do the thing that kind of benefits her in the moment. But she was also very smart.
Can we blame her?
Like incredibly smart. So she was playing chess in her head with New Orleans society as she was doing all of this. Like who is going to have the most power? Maybe she was doing that because that family had a lot of power and she could ask them for a big favor that would ultimately benefit a lot more people. So like there's a lot of that we just don't know. But I will say she was like an incredibly intelligent person and it seems like not doing stuff for immediate gratification, but was doing stuff for like a larger goal that she had in mind.
Right. Got it.
How I would say that. Yeah.
Interestingly, whether Marie Laveau and Madame LaLaurie actually even met is lost to history. Some are, it's actually not confirmed anywhere that they met. But we can imagine that if they did, they probably would not have gotten along.
No. Oh my God. Marie Laveau would have hated Delphine. Like,
even if she may have had her sort of behind the scenes real intentions behind what she did, like you said earlier, she was well respected. And she did assist people in her communities across racial boundaries. Whereas Madame LaLaurie, of course, inflicted atrocities on the enslaved people in her household without reservation or remorse. So if you're picturing a spectrum, I would imagine they're on either side of that spectrum.
Definitely.
But getting back to the legend of the Devil Baby of Bourbon Street, a creature said to still wail through the French Quarter like a hell-born siren ropes in both voodoo queen Marie Laveau and torture maven Madame LaLaurie. According to lore, a baby was born of a mortal woman who died during childbirth and a father who was allegedly a demon. And the result was a child with cracked, reptilian skin, bleeding fissures, and a face that looked less bouncing bundle of joy and more spawn of Satan. Now, if this kid was real, and, not in the Antichrist in a onesie, it's more likely that he had a rare and devastating genetic disorder called Harlequin ichthyosis. Can't wait for dermatologists to pounce on me on that one. Harlequin ichthyosis.
Should I Google it? Am I going to regret looking at images of this?
No, I did. I mean, come on, Kaelyn. This is who we are.
Oh, it comes up when you search Harlequin. Okay, images. Oh, no.
Bad. So it's a very...
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. Whoa. I could see how in the 1800s you would have thought that this child was birthed of a demon.
You can see it, right? It's a very real condition, and it is heartbreaking, and it causes thick, armor-like skin, gaping wounds, deformed limbs, and often leaves babies with bright red eyes, if they even have eyes at all. Sometimes there's little red holes sort of where the eyes should be.
Oh yeah, that came up on Google Image.
Okay.
So I'm aware.
But that kind of medical reality doesn't sell ghost tours or get whispered down alleys at midnight, so the myth has prevailed. As the legend goes, Marie Laveau handed over the child to Madame LaLaurie, either because Madame LaLaurie's husband was this esteemed doctor who claimed expertise in treating physical deformities, or because, frankly, no one else wanted to deal with the Hellboy. What happened next is where folklore and horror collide, twisting into something downright hellish. Pun completely intended. So the devil baby, they say, was kept locked in a pitch-black room for 5 agonizing years, howling, drooling, and subsisting on raw meat like some kind of feral science project. Whether he was imprisoned, experimented on, or simply discarded as a grotesque inconvenience, the story tends to end the same way. He died within those walls under the quote-unquote care of the LaLauries. Because in that house, even so-called monsters from hell didn't stand a chance against Madame LaLaurie. So that's sort of a myth.
Whoa.
Where one of her myths began, and it happened to intertwine with Marie Laveau.
Yeah, wow.
Now, shortly after the devil baby died, which I hate referring to this baby as that, because if this baby was real and had a very real medical condition, how horrible that he's known as devil baby. Like,
oh my God.
Life.
Yeah, welcome to the Victorian era. It's just like
I know.
There was a lot of people dying at the time too of just like all sorts of stuff. So it's tragic, but it's
par for the course a little bit,
par
which is
for the
sad.
course at the time. Yeah.
So shortly after this baby died, on November 16th, 1832, Madame LaLaurie formally separated from Dr. LaLaurie, alleging that he physically assaulted her in public and in front of witnesses. So apparently pain was fine if she was the architect of it, but the second she had to endure it, even for a fraction of a second, the line was drawn. And she would not tolerate it.
It was just she felt embarrassed. Like, it's not even the fact that like she got hurt, but like it's the societal thing for her of like, this can't happen to me.
I'm the great, Madame LaLaurie. I'm the one who brought the wealth into this marriage. I'm the one who brings, the name and she bought the house and all of this. And he has the nerve to humiliate her in public. But 5 months later, Dr. LaLaurie did agree to the separation, and he relocated permanently to a separate residence, reportedly leaving behind his surgical instruments, medical devices, and a newly single and increasingly formidable Madame LaLaurie. Now the undisputed mistress of 1140 Royal Street, she reigned over its grand halls and shadowed chambers with absolute autonomy. No husband, no quote-unquote oversight, no one to temper her will. And with that freedom came something far more dangerous. Unchecked power in the hands of a woman with a taste for control, and a house built to hide it. The unraveling began, at least publicly, in 1833. Neighbors recalled the sound of a child's screams piercing the afternoon air, echoing through the streets of the French Quarter. Witnesses looked up to see Madame LaLaurie chasing Leah, a young enslaved girl, across the upper floors of the mansion, whip in hand. The girl, terrified, cornered, ran to the rooftop for safety, her cries growing more and more desperate with every step. And then there was just silence. Moments later, the little girl's body was found in the courtyard below. She had either fallen, jumped, or had been pushed. And none of it sits well.
No, all of it's bad.
All of it. I was actually thinking about this maybe an unhealthy amount of time, and my brain determined that if she jumped, that's just the saddest outcome of it all. It's like, I remember my father witnessed the Twin Towers coming down. He happened to be going into Manhattan that day.
Oh my gosh.
And he called my mother and he's like, it looks like the Twin Towers, one of the Twin Towers is a pepper shaker. All this, and it was bodies of people throwing themselves out of the window. And like, to think that this little girl was so terrified and she was being chased by this absolute fucking sadistic nightmare of a woman. And she felt that was her way out, or her...
Right, being in that position where that feels like the best option, and you know that it's a horrible option, but the opposite, or like the other options are just worse.
Exactly.
Is so heartbreaking. Especially because that house is tall. Like the version that exists in New Orleans today, I think, has an extra floor added on top of it.
A third floor that was added.
Yeah, but even like the first 2 stories are like just pretty tall. You can tell there's like really tall ceilings. It's just like, you're not just jumping out of like a second story. It's like really actually kind of like a 4th story because of how tall it is.
That's crazy. Yeah, she didn't survive it. I mean, that's how high it was. In the days that followed, Madame LaLaurie made a predictable attempt to conceal the incident, insisting that it was just an accident. But the authorities, spurred by public outcry, conducted a search of the property, during which they discovered the child's body hidden in a well on the grounds.
Yeah, she knew that she messed up.
Right. So she tried to conceal the body, but it was discovered. So on that note, pop quiz.
Ooh, okay. Morbid time for a pop quiz.
This is always how I listen to older episodes too when Tank was on, and I'll be like, I am so sorry, but it's in the script and I have a pop quiz and it couldn't be at a worse time.
We wrote it in here. We have to do it.
But at the time when these pop quizzes were developed with Tank, it was intentional in a way, not to be disrespectful to the gravity of the situation, but for his sake to punctuate the real darkness, to give him a little reprieve. So definitely. Maybe we can see the silver lining in this very poorly timed pop quiz. But what happened as a result of this horrific discovery, of the little girl in the well? A, Madame LaLaurie blamed the incident on Marie Laveau, who was forced to stand trial. B, Madame LaLaurie was praised by a local newspaper for demonstrating emotional poise in the face of property damage, because enslaved individuals, we know, horrifically were considered property. Or C, Madame LaLaurie was issued a small fine for the death of the child and ordered to sell the rest of her enslaved individuals.
I'm going to scream if it's number 2, so I'm going to guess it was number 3.
Very good, Kaelyn. You are correct. The answer is number 3, and my horrific mind that I'm not proud of in this particular moment came up with B.
Because it feels like an actual possibility.
It could have been.
Unfortunately, because of how people reviewed, it just seems like they would be like, well, it was property damage.
Completely.
So you did a good job, not being too upset.
By and large, that was the attitude. But in this case, they responded with really what can only be described as a slap on the wrist, a modest fine and an order.
Yeah.
But it's something, I guess, an order for Madame LaLaurie to sell the remaining enslaved individuals on her estate. But Madame LaLaurie, like so many with a deeply manipulative nature, did what manipulators do best. She found a way to maintain control. She orchestrated a scheme in which her friends and relatives purchased the enslaved people on her behalf, only to return them back to her in secret. So the abuse didn't stop. Wow. It just went underground. And the torture continued behind locked doors, behind silk curtains, until it could no longer be hidden. Now, let me paint the contrast for you. And, Kaelyn, obviously, you've seen the outside of it, but this is it's as stark as it is sickening. A masterpiece of Creole architecture was the mansion, right? The LaLaurie mansion, hiding a mausoleum of human torment on the inside. Grandeur above ground, gore behind closed doors, beauty as a mask for barbarity. The mansion itself was stunning. A 2-story at the time Creole-style estate with sweeping balconies, ornate ironwork, and an elegant interior courtyard. Inside, it was filled with fine art, gilded furniture, and delicate chandeliers, a showcase of refinement and wealth. Madame LaLaurie regularly hosted glittering soirees that drew the elite of New Orleans society, nights of champagne, music, and carefully curated opulence, often written up in the society columns with breathless admiration. Like she was the shit of the time. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Also, her house is in the middle of everything.
Yeah.
When you're walking through the downtown French Quarter, it's just right there. The amount of hiding people that would have had to take place so that no one knew what was going on is wild to think about.
Yeah, it was situated right in the middle of things. Location. It had a good one. Now, but that also, just to curve off that for a second, that's what makes what happened so extra horrific. It was right there, people. It was happening right there,
Yeah.
Now,
I'm sure people knew what was happening. There's no way you wouldn't be able to hear some of it, as morbid as that is, but I think people just turned a blind eye.
And for years, neighbors did whisper about screams in the night. They noticed enslaved individuals disappearing without explanation, and they detected a smell that no amount of expensive perfume could ever fully mask. But all of these concerns went largely ignored and were generally just dismissed by a society too dazzled by pearls and pedigree to care that blood was seeping through the floorboards. Until, that is, April 10th, 1834, when ignorance was no longer an option and the lid was ripped right off of one of the most brutal acts of human cruelty in American history, and certainly one of the darkest and most haunting chapters ever recorded in New Orleans. And just note that everything I'm about to tell you now is not myth. This is all documented, witnessed, and has changed New Orleans forever. So a fire broke out in the kitchen of the LaLaurie mansion, and as it spread, a crowd quickly gathered outside, right? Neighbors, onlookers, concerned citizens. Many of them began helping Madame LaLaurie carry out her valuables to protect them from the flames, even while she's yelling at them like, don't come into my house, right? Some even suggested that the enslaved people be evacuated from the home to prevent injury or death. To that, Madame LaLaurie's response was, quote, much rudeness, according to witnesses and newspapers that I dug up from the time. She was dismissive, she was hostile, and she reportedly told them all to mind their own affairs and to stay out of hers when her fucking house is burning down, right? She's telling these people, mind your mind, you know?
Yeah. And also, mind you, this is back in the 1800s where everything was made of wood that wasn't treated or anything. Everything in the whole city could have burned down if her house was burning down. So of course the neighbors are concerned about what's going on. And she's just out there screaming at everyone to mind their own business.
I got it. I'm good here. Nothing to see
Does
here.
this concern you? And they're like, yes, it literally does.
She's like, go away, Karen. All right, I got it.
Yeah.
But as the flames advanced and the tension mounted, a judge who happened to be on the scene ordered the doors be broken down by a small group that forced their way into the smoke-filled mansion. The doors I'm talking about now are specifically to the torture chamber, which was next to the servants' quarters. So now there's people in her home, and now she's going even more fucking apeshit at them. You know what I mean? Definitely don't open this door. It's one thing that you're now in my house.
Right.
You do not open this door. But the judge said, on my order, you are to open that door. And what followed made the gossip columns look like church bulletins. From the shadows, the crowd discovered a level of human suffering that defied comprehension. Several enslaved individuals, chained and mutilated, appearing out of the darkness, bodies covered in scars, flesh shredded by months or years of torture. One newspaper, the New Orleans Courier, described it as an appalling sight, noting that the quote-unquote wretched Negroes bore wounds and chains so severe they seemed too incredible for human belief. At least 7 victims, 2 men, 4 women, and 1 whose gender was not recorded, were chained to the walls in the torture chamber, which I said was next to the servants' quarters. Some people, some of them, were barely alive, and all were absolutely mutilated. Reports from the time describe victims who had been tortured, starved, and subjected to unspeakable cruelty over an extended period of time. Some of the victims were bound by their necks, others suspended from the ceiling, limbs grotesquely stretched and torn from their sockets. Some were tied up in unnatural positions so that their bodies were forced into contorted, painful, abnormal, positions. Their bodies were emaciated, their skin punctured by iron collars fitted with sharpened points designed to inflict constant pain, suffering, and degradation. Their wounds were open, infected, and infested with insects like worms and maggots. Deliberately, mind you, because pain wasn't a byproduct of their captivity, it was the objective. One man, according to a horrified witness, had an open hole in his skull, and his body was riddled with worm-infested lesions from head to toe. Some victims were shackled like animals. Others were crammed into cages barely large enough to contain a body, with their limbs twisted to fit. According to reports, many had been subjected to sadistic medical experimentations, bones shattered and crudely reset at horrific unnatural angles, skulls bored into as if they were test subjects rather than human beings. One woman's limbs, for example, had been bent, fractured, and fused until she resembled something like a crab forced upright. Another person's skin had been flayed in neat, calculated spirals like meat off a spit. One individual was found with her intestines draped around her shoulders like a gruesome scarf. Death by design, horror by hand. Some had their mouths sewn shut, while others had their eyes gouged out. One witness even claimed that there were people with holes in their skulls and then wooden spoons nearby, presumably used to quote-unquote stir their brains. You okay?
Oh my gosh, this is just like one of the worst things I've ever heard.
It's so bad. Another nightmarish account described how all were forced to wear heavy iron collars with spikes designed to keep their heads in one position at all times. The body chains around the victims that connected to the floor were so tight, they could only move inches at a time while dragging their traumatized silence in chains behind them. There was a cowhide whip stained with blood hanging on the wall, as well as a stepladder that Madame LaLaurie would stand on so that she would be at a higher angle and therefore able to apply more force when she whipped her victims. All of these poor souls were clearly there to serve one purpose and one purpose only under their ruthless mistress, and that was to suffer. All of them were emaciated, starved not by absent-minded neglect, but by design. Because sadism at its core is about power and domination, the pleasure derived not just from inflicting pain, but from witnessing the erosion of autonomy, the breaking of spirit, and the humiliation of it all. Madame LaLaurie didn't just abuse, she orchestrated suffering for the art of it, for the entertainment value. And watching her victims waste away served a dual purpose, okay? It gratified her own perverse desire for control, and it weakened her victims' physical capacity to work, giving her justification, however twisted, to then punish them further for their quote-unquote uselessness. She had actually been brought to court once, which was an exceedingly rare occurrence for someone of her social standing. But under the laws of the time, the treatment of enslaved individuals was viewed as a matter of personal discretion, more an issue of taste than of legality. And so, unsurprisingly, no charges were brought. In terms of the fire, so it turns out that it wasn't an accident. It was an act of resistance. A 70-year-old enslaved woman working as a cook in the LaLaurie mansion, too broken to keep enduring, too brave to let it continue, set the blaze in a desperate attempt to just end the nightmare, and not just for herself, but for those being tortured alongside her.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that heartbreaking thing of jumping off the side. It's like, if I set this fire, there is a small chance that someone will come save me in time, and there's a massive chance that I will burn and die, and both are better options than what is happening currently. And it's just like, it's such a heartbreaking spot to be put in.
It really is. It really is. The survivors were rescued and brought to the mayor's office for food, treatment, and, according to some sources, a macabre public viewing by about 2,000 New Orleans residents who just wanted to see them like they were on display.
Yeah, right. And that's how we have all of this kind of first-person witness testimony about it, right? I imagine is because so many people went to go gawk at this.
Yes. It's just still such a obviously degrading experience that, I'm like, God, really? You rescued these people and then you set them up to be like in a zoo,
Yeah, right. Yeah, one of those like horrible human zoos, essentially.
2 individuals tragically succumbed to their injuries. Now, this whole horror show was massive news, and 2 of the biggest newspapers immediately published what had been discovered inside the LaLaurie mansion, which again is also how we have a lot of the information we have today. Investigators found several bodies to the tune of about 20, including 1 child, buried throughout the mansion grounds. And that's not including the 12 enslaved individuals known to have died under Madame LaLaurie's watch in just the 2 years since she moved into the mansion. That number is staggering, especially when you consider the context. So these were domestic workers, right? Cleaning, cooking, tending to the household. They were not laboring in the treacherous conditions of sugar plantations or enduring the hazards of agricultural toil, right? So for that amount of people to have died in her care really, really highlights what the fuck was going on inside the walls of that home.
12 people in 2 years is insane.
Exactly. Like I said, if you're on the plantations and you're doing manual labor and there's more of a risk, and I would, the counts are just higher, very sadly, for fatalities. But for domestic workers, that is a staggering number.
Yeah, there's also a lot of yellow fever at the time and people getting bit by mosquitoes and just literally dying from that. So like the death toll was really high in general, but if you're inside and you're not at a high risk of the yellow fever, I don't know. It feels so high.
I actually included that and I ended up taking it out earlier in the scripts. I had a little piece about yellow fever, also about how when she was growing up, yellow fever was rife. And so she was just, in addition to seeing enslaved individuals being tortured and killed and treated like animals and like property, she also was watching people die left, right, and center from yellow fever.
All over the place.
So wherever she looked, this is no excuse, by the way. I'm just, again, painting the picture of like what she was exposed to at like a tender age. Death, 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 like everywhere she looked. But again, so was everybody else. And they were not torturing enslaved individuals in their homes.
I'm surprised that there weren't almost more really depraved serial killer type people just because of the amount of like death and torture and all of that they were seeing kind of on a daily basis that was normalized for them. Yeah, I don't know. You would think that it would be way higher. Maybe people were doing it in secret, but...
Exactly. I was just going to say, I think it was happening. It just wasn't getting caught. She had a fire that literally like blew the door off. You know what I mean?
Right.
If it wasn't for this fire, she probably would have gone on and on and on. So it does sort of lend the question, where else, how many other homes was something like this going down? Like history only reports on what has been discovered.
Yeah, I would venture to say every home that owned people.
Correct. No matter how you slice it, there was depravity. This level too, people who make the history books are just the ones that were caught. Not to like freak anybody out.
That's a good way to put it.
So anyway, the public was so beyond disturbed, like you and I are, by what happened that they essentially rioted and destroyed the LaLaurie mansion. The only thing left at the end of this riot was the physical structure itself. Literally everything else had been wrecked, from the floors to the stairs to the artwork to the wainscoting to the windows, to the walls.
To the walls.
Thank you.
Everything.
Nothing was looted. Everything was destroyed in a bonfire on Royal Street. And I think that like really paints a picture of how society reacted. Like she had really expensive artwork. People off the bat were like, this is some fucked up shit. Like this is a dark motherfucker. Like get rid of it all, you know?
Yeah. I know that we all turned a blind eye to this for the last couple years, but like now we're mad. Now that our properties almost got burned down, we're pretty upset.
Exactly. Now that
Good
you're
job,
putting
guys.
it in my face and I have to see it and you are forcing me to look with my eyes, I'm mad.
Yeah. And now I'm mad.
Madame LaLaurie and her family fled the mansion via horse and carriage just moments before the enraged mom descended on it. She then boarded a boat and disappeared across the sea to Mobile, Alabama, I think, and then to New York and then to France in order to escape justice. Some sources skip the New York component, but it was Mobile, Alabama, my understanding, New York, France.
Oh, interesting. I only knew that she ever went back to France. I didn't know how she got there.
Okay, so that was her path.
Okay.
Somehow, after she had already now escaped, her carriage and horses returned to the mansion without her. And tragically, and I hate this so hard, but I still put it in the script so you can all hate it with me. The enraged mob, already seething from what they discovered inside, took their fury out on the animals and stabbed the horses to death in a frenzy of misplaced vengeance. Fuck right off. But you know what? They're owning human beings. How can I expect them?
Well, it kind of goes back to us talking about how this mob was not necessarily like an agent of good. They were just an agent of like, we're showing everyone that we're mad right now. And so, of course, they would kill the horses. They're just like shitty people.
Very shitty people. I don't have this in my script, but interestingly, I'll just bring it up because in case you were wondering or anybody's wondering, like, how did she escape the mob, right? So she escaped with the help of her coachman. And her coachman was possibly involved in some kind of like sexual relationship with her, possibly, which is why he wasn't being tortured and why he ultimately helped Madame LaLaurie to escape because they were involved. But it's just a little potential interesting piece of the puzzle here.
Definitely. How she was able to escape in the middle of all of that.
Right. What Madame LaLaurie did during the 15 years following her escape remains shrouded in mystery. What is known is that Marie Delphine McCarthy LaLaurie died in Paris on December 7th, 1849, at the ripe age of 62. Even her death, though, is laced with eerie folklore. One particularly gory legend claims that she was gored by a wild pig and split open from stem to sternum, which, like, karma is a bitch. I hope you enjoyed meeting her.
I hope it's that one. Of all the versions, I hope it's that one.
Exactly. I don't generally wish harm on people, but Madame LaLaurie...
This one's okay. We're okay here.
I hope you were gutted. But regardless of how she died, it's believed that her remains were sent back to New Orleans, though there actually is no official record to confirm this. However, and you probably, I'm guessing, have probably saw this, there's a tomb in St. Louis Cemetery in New Orleans with the name Madame LaLaurie, née Marie Delphine McCarthy, and a death date of December 1842. Even though it said she died in 1849, there's some ambiguity around her death and where she was when she died. Other accounts suggest that Madame LaLaurie never actually left Louisiana on the day of the fire, at least not for good. Other rumors claim that she, quietly returned to New Orleans, that she did leave, but came back 8 years after the fire, sort of like infiltrating back into society under a veil of discretion. In fact, legal documents from around the time indicate her involvement in managing an estate in Louisiana, suggesting that she may have remained closer to the scene of her crimes than anyone ever realized.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe she didn't actually leave.
Because remember, she had that coachman a little bit in her pocket, so maybe he staged it to make it look like she got away. I mean, if I were a betting woman, I would bet that she got away, that she boarded the boat, and she did live her days in Paris.
And then they just sent her back like it was maybe her dying wish. Like, I want to be buried in New Orleans, so send me back.
I think her second husband as well, Jean-Paul Blanc, had a plot. And this is going to sound callous, but like he had extra room in his plot.
She was like, throw me in that one.
They took her remains and they put it in there. That's another thought on it.
That's very New Orleans, though, to all be buried together. That's kind of...
Yeah?
Yeah, you have a... Yeah. Have you heard about this?
No.
This is my favorite way to be buried. This is what I would want to do, but like they just don't do it here. But they have these big above ground tombs because you can't bury anyone underground in New Orleans. It's all water. So all the bodies float back up. So they have to bury people above ground, which also I was thinking, this is like a side note, but like I'm from New England, and a lot of like big medical advancements were made in New England in the 1800s because people would dig up bodies and in secret, because it was illegal, would practice medicine on them. You couldn't do that in New Orleans because there were no bodies below ground. Wow. And when you bury them above ground, they essentially melt really fast. So they were like practicing on enslaved people, like all of their medicine. God. But so you put, like, someone dies in the family, you put them in this big above ground tomb. It gets really hot in the summer. That person gets reduced to ash within just a few years. The next person in the family dies. You kind of shove the ashes to the back. You put the next person in. They melt down to ash. And you just keep shoving all the ashes to the back. So you can, like, there's above ground tombs, no joke, like over 100 people inside of them.
What? That's
because
wild.
It's all just ash that's just piled on top of each other. So everyone kind of gets all mixed in together.
But they weren't cremated. They like literally disintegrated.
No, it's like nature's cremation, essentially. Because it gets like over 200 degrees in the tomb. And if you're doing that for years and years, the bodies just like decompose really fast.
I'm with you though. There's something nice about that. Not the decomposing
I know, it's
shit,
kind
but
of like romantic. I'm like, mix my ashes with all my family.
Well,
like that's...
I have a living will. This is going to sound so creepy. Listen, we know
I love it.
We know who we're dealing with, right? So cremate me. And I have ashes from my dogs who are my world, both living and not living. And I have said my living will to my parents and Dave, when and if I go before all of you, cremate me and mix me right now with Luca, which is my, and just do it. And that's what I want. And it doesn't even matter. Yes. I will be happy in my afterlife if I am with him. I know this to be true. So
forever.
Just do that. And then that's I
love it.
Yeah. So good. My God, we are cut from the same cloth.
It's like sounds strange to people who aren't from New Orleans, but in New Orleans, they'd be like, yeah, all the ashes get mixed together. Like everyone's together. That's not weird.
It's kind of fantastic. I feel like it also solves a big space issue as well.
Huge.
It's going to start happening.
It's just one tomb for a family and everyone goes in there.
It's so beautiful. That is honestly. So can we get plots in New Orleans so that we can have this happen with our loved ones?
I think we start it where we are.
So let's
I think we have to be the first ones.
Let's go.
I just want a big Gothic mausoleum in Connecticut full of hundreds of my loved ones, and we're all just like mixed together in there. I don't think
honestly,
that's weird.
And I'm being completely serious. Me too. I don't think I would fear death as much. I don't fear death, which is another fucked up thing about me. Like, I really don't. But I think I would fear it even less if I knew that was going to be how I was going to spend eternity.
I totally agree. Everyone's together. It's not this like lonesome experience where you're just in a solo casket below the ground. Like that to me is just
terrifying.
The imagery is really sad and scary. But if you're all together,
not so bad.
And like you're all just like shoved to the back of the mausoleum, like melted down into one big thing. It's like, it's just beautiful.
It is. I agree with you. And I think we should start it. You can do West Coast and I can do East Coast.
Yes.
All right, good. Of course, many believe that Madame LaLaurie's spirit still lingers in New Orleans to this day, less of a ghost and more of a shit stain that refuses to fade. They say she haunts the old mansion on Royal Street, where tourists report cold spots, phantom screams, and the faint clink of chains dragging across the floorboards. Many allege to have seen the ghost of Leah, the little girl who was thrown or threw herself or fell off the roof, standing at the edge. The house, I have to admit, I severely underestimated your knowledge of this case. So like this next pop quiz, you're probably going to nail it, but let's go.
Yeah, so ask me anyways. I'm excited.
The house was actually, for those who didn't know, and I didn't know until I did the research. So if you don't know, by the way, nobody feel bad. Like I only knew this after researching for this episode. The house was actually bought and sold multiple times and has had countless tenants and undergone multiple renovations and expansions, including, as we've mentioned, a third story. Pop quiz. Which statement is true? A, the house became a furniture store. B, it became a school for girls of color. C, actor Nicolas Cage bought the house. D, all of the above.
I know Nick Cage owned the house. I don't know about the other two, though. So I know it's at least C.
Mm-hmm. I'm wearing a great poker face right now. So
I know. I really don't know. I'm going to say C.
You're right, but you're not fully right. You know what I mean?
But it became all of those things over the years. Interesting.
Exactly. So it became a furniture store in 1892. And according to local lore, brand new sofas and chairs that would arrive pristine to the murder mansion turned furniture store would be found slashed open by morning, shredded to bits, and soaked in human waste. We're talking urine, feces, and blood. The items in the store fell victim to, quote, a ghostly vandal. As if the house itself or whatever spirits were lurking was rejecting anything new and anything untainted. Then, during the Reconstruction era following the war, the mansion was repurposed as a school specifically for Black girls who began displaying unexplained scratches all over their bodies. When the girls were asked how they got those marks, their answers were always the same: that woman. Which reminded me of the story you told in the beginning of the kid who's like, is that man going to be here all night?
Yeah, right. The kids are kind of tapped into stuff a little bit more.
They're like very matter of fact. Ooh. Hey, girls, how did you get those scratches? Oh, that woman.
That woman.
Oh, my God.
Ooh, that's scary.
In 2007, Nicolas Cage dropped $3.5 million on the mansion, claiming that he planned to write the next great American horror novel in the house. Plot twist.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's why he did it.
Exactly. Plot twist. The only horror story was his bank account. By 2009, the house was in foreclosure after his manager allegedly looted his finances like one of the fucking pirate brothers. So he couldn't even go on to do what he set out to do because he was robbed.
There's also like a belief that because the house has only ever been owned for a few years, like everyone who owns it for only a few years. and that the house drives people mad once they move in.
Yes.
So there's this story that's told by the locals. Nicolas Cage's PR team can come after me for this one. But the story by locals is there's like this tale of Nicolas Cage when he was like, quote unquote, writing his novel in the home, was like running through the streets naked, having like a big meltdown.
Yep.
And all the locals were like, oh yeah, it's because the house drives everyone mad. And the theory now is this like Texas billionaire or whoever who's owned it for 13 years. It's just because he doesn't really live there. Like
He's
the
not
house sits
affected.
empty. He's only there twice a year, so he hasn't really been as effective. And I kind of want to Google it, but I do think he just sold it.
But yes,
But maybe actually you know that.
Nicolas Cage was reported to have suffered, I don't know if it was one like mega nervous breakdown or just a series of mental health struggles, but he did encounter those experiences while he was in the house, which is what, he was like, okay, so, I'm going to move and whatever. But the real sort of reason is that his manager stole all of his money and he was like, fuck, I gotta sell this house.
He has a tomb in the St. Louis #1 cemetery right next to Marie Laveau.
Wait, who has a tomb next to Marie Laveau?
Nicolas Cage.
What the fuck is Nicolas Cage doing in this case?
He bought a pyramid and put it in the middle of this Victorian-era cemetery. And he's like, yeah, I want to be buried there when I die. And so there's a theory that this was some sort of like tax evasion thing because the government can't repurpose if you've bought yourself a tomb. It's a $500,000 tomb. It's a $500,000 tomb that he bought. So it was like a way for him to kind of store some money away, I think, while his manager was stealing from him or while he was like losing all of his money.
It's like getting a Rolex.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It was like his version of a Rolex. It's just this like really gothic pyramid tomb in New Orleans. But yeah, he's there.
Wow.
Like when he dies, he might get put there.
Wow. And he'll get there. He can have it with everyone he wants because you can do that in New Orleans.
Yeah, exactly.
So as far as Madame LaLaurie, which I try and say it correctly occasionally because I realize, thank you, that I'm saying Madame LaLaurie, which probably sounds like Marissa Tomei from My Cousin Vinny this whole episode, and I'm sorry, guys. But if I tried to say Madame LaLaurie the entire episode, it would actually be probably more annoying. But I do understand how it's supposed to be pronounced. She was never arrested. Obviously, she was never deposed, never sat for a single interview, which means any psychological profile is a mix of educated guesses and straight-up forensic intuition. But lucky for us, taking a shot at developing a profile for a bad guy is basically my toxic trait. So let's get into it. First of all, we know she's a sadist. We've touched on that a bunch already. But based on what she left behind, it would also seem that Madame LaLaurie displayed traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, right? Grandiosity, entitlement, a hunger for admiration, layered over what may have been clear antisocial tendencies, callousness, lack of remorse, instrumental cruelty. Her compartmentalization was chilling. In one room, she curated glittering parties beneath chandeliers, while in another, human beings were reduced to test subjects, restraint points, and prolonged suffering. Two selves, one mask. Forensic experts who study extreme offenders like Dr. Catherine Ramsland and others in the field often describe these patterns as a collision between individual pathology and cultural permission. Society told her that enslaved people were property. Her psychology weaponized that message. The result? Violence framed as discipline, torture disguised as household management, sadism with social cover. Side note, Dr. Catherine Ramsland was Brian Koberger's professor of forensic psychology before
You're kidding.
I shit you not.
Oh my God.
I know. It's obviously for anybody who doesn't know, but I'm sure that this crew knows. He just recently pleaded guilty to killing 4 University of Idaho students, known, of course, as the Idaho 4. But she was his professor. But she's considered like an expert on serial killers. In fact, we're really derailing here. When she heard about what happened, that Brian Koberger was arrested and all that, she was floored. Like she could not see it.
Wow.
And
okay,
she's
that's
this
interesting.
Expert on...
And she's this expert. There's something about his profile that just did not make sense to her in the way that she knew him. Wow.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
It's really scary when that happens. We just on Clues covered BTK
Oh,
and he's
yeah.
another one where his profile just really did not make any sense to profilers.
That's the scariest perpetrator to be looking for because you're chasing your tail.
Like a pretty normal childhood, too. You're like, where did this come from in you?
Yeah.
So scary.
Madame LaLaurie likely escalated over time. We know she did, starting with emotional abuse before moving on to the physical beatings and then the torture. This mirrors the trajectory of many serial killers where the need for domination becomes an addiction. And without consequence, there is no ceiling. And then there's the question of Madame LaLaurie's husband, Dr. LaLaurie. So he was a physician, right? He had surgical tools, anatomical knowledge, access. If he supplied instruments, medical space, or even tacit approval, we're no longer looking at a solitary sadist at that particular time. We're staring down the possibility of folie à deux. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah. Like he maybe drove her crazy a little bit.
Yeah, it's a shared psychopathic enterprise. So in clinical terms, folie à deux literally means madness of two, describes a dynamic in which one dominant personality's distorted beliefs or impulses are adopted, enabled, or amplified by a partner. So I would say it would be Madame LaLaurie in the driver's seat.
Oh, yeah, where she was really affecting him.
In criminal contexts, folie à deux can show up as moral fusion, right? One partner provides the drive, the other the means, and then together is when they escalate. Did she drive the cruelty while he medicalized it? Did he rationalize procedures that allowed her to prolong suffering under a veneer of experimentation? We can't prove that, but the pattern fits a disturbing template seen in other abusive dyads: shared secrecy, reinforced delusion, and escalating harm sustained by mutual complicity. Ghost tours, documentaries, and we're wrapping up here, and fiction have all fed the legend of Madame LaLaurie. Most notably, Kathy Bates portrayed her in American Horror Story, I mentioned, right, where her crimes were seriously dramatized. But we must not let the ghost stories erase the truth, because these were real people. Real victims. The horror they endured was not cinematic, it was physical, psychological, existential. They were tortured for years and then buried, literally and metaphorically, by history. There were no autopsies, no names recorded for most of the victims, no justice system response. The forensic story of this case is one of erasure. The LaLaurie mansion is now part of the ghost tourism industry, but it should really, really be something more. A site of mourning, a place where the real names of the victims are remembered, where the silence is broken. Because Delphine LaLaurie was not a ghost. She was a woman, a human, a master of masking monstrosity in manners, a tyrant in diamonds, which means her crimes were not supernatural, which means they were preventable. And that is the true horror. And that was the case.
Ooh, that was a really good ending. You're such a good writer.
Thank you. Thank you. You, honestly, this was incredible. First of all, this is not to give myself props. There's no other way for me to, I could not have picked a better case to do with you because you are so knowledgeable. You have so much insight into the general subject matter of like myths and lore, but specifically of New Orleans in this time period, of the ancillary characters. Like, you crushed it. This was incredible to hear your insight and to have you on. I just
love New Orleans. Shout out to New Orleans for being a really spooky, scary place with tons of rich history that's kind of been passed via word of mouth for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting place. It's like, it's a place where stuff like this happened, but I don't know, just the culture and everything and the history is so fascinating. I love it.
I love
the ghost stories.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Annabelle didn't burn this mansion
Kaelyn,
when she went.
I can't believe you just brought up Annabelle. Can I tell you something? I got halfway through, Kaelyn, an episode on Annabelle to do with you. And then you released an episode on Annabelle like a week ago or something, or like a couple weeks. No, but I think it was the end of June, maybe. It was like very recently. So I was halfway through and I was like...
That would have also been a fun one to do together because there's so much there.
Oh my goodness.
There's so much I didn't even get into in that episode because I was really just trying to do like a recap on her tour that she's been on and just how like horrible it's gone. I mean, really devastating stuff in every single stop she's gone to.
Well, that was my
her story
angle.
Is so interesting.
You know what I mean? Even more so than like the ghost element or the legend, the lore. It was the real shit that's been going down on this tour.
I know. Yeah.
So you know what this means, right? It means I'm going to have you back on.
Oh, bummer. Oh my gosh.
Damn it.
No, I would love to. Obviously, whenever. I'll come on whenever.
Amazing. Good. You have an open invitation.
No, you did so much good research. I obviously like love research. I love the actual historical facts that you can pull from the myth and the legends. And yeah, you did such a good job with that. So
Thank you.
This was like really interesting. I feel like I actually learned a lot doing this.
Good. That's what I hope for you to walk away with. It's just some more knowledge, you know, on a topic that you are well versed in, generally speaking. You know,
yes,
it was
definitely.
a great episode, a great time. Thank you so much. I want to just remind everybody, or you can, where they can find you.
Yes, definitely check out our Ghosts of New Orleans episode that we did on Heart Starts Pounding, available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube now, and I'm just at Heart Starts Pounding on all socials. That one was really fun to do. And I wrote it when I was in New Orleans, doing all of like the tours and just going to all of the haunted spaces and talking to a lot of the locals and drinking in the haunted bars and stuff. So that was a really fun one to do. And all the stories are coming like straight from the source.
That's the absolute best. So, okay. Yeah. So definitely check out Heart Starts Pounding. And yeah, let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments. If there's any follow-up anybody would be interested in hearing us cover or anything like that. And that's it. I can't thank you enough, Kaelyn. I can't wait to have you back on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Truly
Thank you for
my
having
pleasure.
me. Oh, and everyone go check out the episode we did together on the Heart Starts Pounding feed too, because we did just a bunch of like real life scary encounter stories that we're reading back and forth. And it's very fun. I just listened to a cut of it today.
Oh, good. It was
very
fun to do.
Very scary. Yeah. Amazing. That was a spooky one.
I know.
For sure.
I loved it. It was perfect. I also just want to remind everybody that Girl on Gore, which is my new podcast series, dropped its first episode this past Monday. So check it out. It's available on the Psychopedia channel. So if you're hearing this right now, you can hear Girl on Gore on this channel, wherever you're getting your podcasts. Next episode will come out next Monday. It's going to come out every Monday until the season ends. And you can get early access for the next episode on patreon.com/psychopediapod, where every single week is going to offer you early access to the upcoming public release of Girl on Gore. So definitely make sure to check out Girl on Gore publicly or for early access on Patreon. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. As always, your support and just being by my side in this whole journey means everything to me. So if you're still here, you are a real one. And I'm speaking to you, and I'm thanking you from the bottom of my heart. I love you all. I thank you all for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye.